I guess we can commence our May 3rd meeting of the Natural Resources Board, City of Sebastian. We rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May we have the roll call, please?
Good evening, Board. There'll be 3 members not present tonight. The first one is Chairman Millar. He informed me as well that he will be sending a resignation letter. Oh, damn it. Okay. It was buzzing. All right, so Chairman Millar, I spoke with him. He'll be sending a letter of resignation. Mr. Pogolski will not be here, and Mr. Waragoda. And other than that, Gil Gordian.
Here.
Jim Clifton. Here. Rose Glacier.
Here.
Andrea Ring.
Here.
Vicki Tunker.
Here.
And Lucier.
Here.
Thank you.
In George's case, do we have to go for a vote for chair?
Chair, vice chair, but currently chair right now acting. Since we just found out that George Millar has resigned, we'll place it on the next agenda for election. Your annual election is in October, so we still have a ways to go. So it would be more appropriate to have a new election for the period, and then elect a new chair at the next meeting. And you can still be the vice chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, approval of the minutes from our April meeting.
I just, on page 3, halfway down, it's supposed to be a food vendor instead of a good vendor.
Where was that,
Food
Rose?
vendor.
Page 3, halfway down the page,
Okay.
a food vendor.
Okay. Was there a misspelling on that? I'm just noting that right now.
It says good
Okay, should be food.
instead of food.
All right, thank you.
Either works.
I have a couple on page 4. Phragmites was misspelled. I gave Michelle a sheet with the spelling on it since it's a little weird. And on page 5, Hardy Park is misspelled. It's H-A-R-D, 2 E's. Unfortunately, spell checkers don't find all those things.
I'll make note of this and make the changes.
Motion for approval of the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I second it.
Our next on the list is unfinished business. Sorry?
We need to vote
On the approval of the minutes.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Unfinished business. Some of it is finished, sorta. First on our list is the oyster restoration project, and I think that went pretty well so far. Does anyone have a comment on that? The Boy Scouts on Earth Day, on the 26th, applied the bags, approximately 80 bags, adjacent to the park along the river. And I think it went very well. I think John Giordano did a fine job. We thank the city for their cooperation with a little signage. And hopefully, I'm not sure if the we hope the project will continue. We may have to decide when the next phase will be, and how much, and our acquisition for more oyster shells, and again, the city's cooperation for storing the shells, and again, I'm not sure, we'll contact John to see if we can continue with his operations of it and continuing his efforts into it. Anyone else have a comment on the oyster project?
I got into the tail end of the dedication of the project. They're clearly marked for those that have concern for, infringing on the kayak launch area. They're clearly marked off to the side. There are 4 PVC posts that delineate the area, so I don't see that there should be any issues regarding any people getting into the wrong spot there and not being able to access the river.
And that'll be the question I'll have to ask Mr. Watanabe, if we can expand that going northbound, if there's a possibility, or we find another site for the project to continue that. Do we want to expand that existing spot? Do we need to research that? And then also, we have to monitor, and I'll be willing to monitor that at least once a month to get out there and take a look and grab John Giordano, and we'll take a look and see if some of the oysters are taking onto the bags.
Maybe to answer, your first question was an expansion to the north?
Expansion, right.
Uh,
Should we move into phase 2 only after we see that it is working for us?
Well, here's my comment. This was like a pilot project. If you want to continue with any additional projects, because you didn't break this up as a phasing project. It was like a pilot project. And a phasing project, when you submit that for a permit, you have all the phases and you do a portion of it, and they permit all of it. So then you just do phases of it. And that's where you make sure that you have a comprehensive plan, and then you get a permit for the whole comprehensive plan. And when you do permitting, you can't bifurcate and then just do a piece of it, and then do the next one, then do the next one, but you just do permitting for each one because you don't know the overall comprehensive impact. So you do the whole project and you break it into phases. Your project was a little project, pilot project, which just looked at that area. It was permitted just for that area. Any expansion will require a whole new permit or a permit mod. So you can move forward, but it will require you a permit mod or whole. I'm not sure how the agency will look at it because the intent of this project was a standalone project
I see.
for that area. Any additional projects, if you move it to a different location, it makes sense to call it a whole new project. And that's the reason, no different than the city has its current project that's going to be in place over by the working waterfront. It was not part of this project, it's a separate project. It's going after a separate permit. So that's one question. Second question would be on the monitoring. Yes, we have to monitor it. The monitoring was more, I think, in terms of the mats because they flip and they move around. I think the bags are pretty permanent, so I don't think it's going to require a lot of intense, the monitoring was mainly to make sure it didn't impact navigable boats or any other, just, if you have a huge surge waves or a storm, if the mats flip over. I think the bags are pretty self-containing. So I think the process would be just to make sure that, like you're saying, if it's working.
Because I would wait until at least the end of June to go out there, or mid of June, to see if some of the oysters are taken to that section.
Yeah, I don't.
And send that out and have someone look at it real well.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the time period. I think you have more knowledge in terms of how long it takes for the spat to grow, and what's the right time to go back out there to make sure it is creating oysters. I have no idea.
They should be able to fairly attach themselves within the next month or two. So we'll work on that.
Now, I have a question. The city has money, right, for the oysters, but it is going to go up to the, like you said, the working waterfront. Is that correct?
The city has a separate project from the NRB project. The NRB project was tied with the Boy Scouts. The city went after a separate project and got grants to do an oyster, which is now an oyster bag project, which is going to be as part of the working waterfront. Yes, we do. And we're in the process right now trying to get the permits. In this one, because the working waterfront is permitted originally through DEP, they are the overall umbrella. So the permit will come from DEP, and a secondary permit will come from the Army Corps.
Okay, then can we expand there? I mean, that's not our property, and should we be the person who is asking for it, or should we say the Boy Scouts have to go ask for it? Who wants to expand there? That, I don't know who's supposed to go ask and get the permits.
Again, this project is a city project already. I mean, I think the city's gonna be looking at volunteers to help maybe with the I don't know the all I'm taking care of right now is the project, getting it permitted, getting it all ready to go. How it's gonna be implemented, that may come from the city manager. And I'm saying, it requires, it doesn't seem like it doesn't require a lot of manpower because this is the bags, but it does require some, manpower. If the city manager decides it wants to use its own public works crews, it could be done that way. It's in a self-contained area. The agencies, we've already had our pre-meetings with the agencies because when we had the meetings with your project, I took it upon the same time to use the same field agents to review the working waterfront, and they all said this is a great location because it's self-contained. They said this shouldn't be any problem getting a permit. So I think we're in a good straight because we already have that knowledge of putting together the permits for the oyster bag or restorations. I believe getting the Army Corps and the DEP permits is going to be real simple. It's just we just haven't moved forward yet because we're still waiting for the grant comes from now the Lagoon Council, which we have not yet gotten kind of like an agreement. We have letters saying that we won the grant, we're going to get the grant, but we don't have the official contract in place yet that has the money source and the time schedule. The last I heard was we were putting together a work scope, basically saying what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, and that's where we sit right now.
So in according with the working waterfront, what would be our participation in that as a board?
I think if your question goes back to Andrew, if you want to be more involved, I could raise it back to the city manager. The current project was mainly just a city project.
Does anyone have any comments on that? Other? Okay. I guess we'll move on to the Champion Tree update.
We, for Earth Day, produced about 100. Michelle printed up 100 of the brochure that we had available. Not a lot of them left the table on Earth Day. I think how they were displayed is part of that problem. In the future, we need to secure some stands so that they can, anything that we are attempting to pass out will have better visibility. So there's that aspect of it. I spoke with Mr. Watanabe about displaying the brochures around various locations around in city buildings, and that there's a number of places where they could be displayed. So you should be seeing them as you go to various locations in the city in the very near future. And also, just prior to the meeting, I don't remember the exact dollar amount, it was $180 some dollars that's available in our budget.
Just to help out right now, with the Earth Day, which was a great job, and Rose did a great, we'll be talking about it. You currently have now remaining in that, it was meant to be for marketing and for the Earth Day, $286 plus some change. That's the number we have in our accounts through our finance department that, unless there's some other invoices that has not been submitted yet, that's the remaining budget left. I think a big chunk was because Walmart provided the bike, so that helped out a lot. Thank you, Walmart. So we have about $286, which I think before the year ends up, maybe use some of that money since it is marketing, but we can't market for the next Earth Day. That'll be a new budget. I would suggest if you have a project like the Champion Trees to provide whatever marketing you need to keep that project, displayed out.
Yeah. So you're suggesting waiting until the next meeting before we allocate funds for printing professional brochures? I think
it's up to your discretion. It's your remaining money. I think it's the intent of the money was to market items within the NRB. The biggest one was Earth Day. So I think now that Earth Day is passed, you can't be taking it and spending for next year. That has to be reallocated for this coming year. Yeah. Any other, like yours, I think is still open you could use that money, what's left over, to buy brochures, whatever.
Mhm.
I think it's within that realm, so.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
Do we need a vote?
I'm sorry?
Do we need a motion and a vote on that?
Yeah, I don't recall, Michelle, do you, or Frank,
Okay,
do you
I'll make
recall
a-
the cost of the brochures that we looked at before?
I think it was like in the hundred something, but
That was for 400 of them, right?
yeah, I'll double check.
So,
Yeah, I'll pull up
But
that
the-
email and I'll double check the amount and I'll resend it to you guys. There was like 150 something, but let me just verify that amount.
okay, I mean, we could wait till the next meeting to get all the details together. On, various, Michelle, if we could get different quantities, I don't think 400's a real number. I think it's considerably less than that, maybe 100 of them would be adequate for our purposes.
Okay, I'll note that.
Thank you.
And Jim, if you wanna come over, I have 2 big oak trees, if you wanna measure them out for practice, feel free, you know.
I have a question. Do we have any trees out there right now that are already on the website, or?
There was a list.
We
that
do
was-
have an existing database, and I've been thinking just to get things moving, probably get in first do a drive-by to see if the tree still exists on the property, and then get in contact with those property owners to see if we could remeasure it, and fill out the data with the new forms that we've got and all that sort of thing, just to get things rolling. And driving around, just today, I saw, I don't know what kind of a tree it was, but it's big. So I have to maybe stop and see if those property owners would be interested in telling me what kind of tree it is, and just to get the thing moving. Yeah, that's what I've been planning on doing.
Okay. Would it be appropriate, I wanted to ask Mr. Watanabe about that, would it be appropriate to send the mailing to some of the residents, start at certain quadrants in the city and send the mailing out to some of the
Help me out
residents, or just
regarding-
leave it as is?
I'm confused, the mailing
Send the
for what?
mailing out to some of the property owners as far as the project,
for the trees?
yes.
Maybe you could list it in the city newsletter that comes out
Yeah,
quarterly.
probably
Yeah.
a newsletter would be easier.
Yeah, the newsletter, I'm still confused, you want, like a mailer go out to all the residents?
Or in the newsletter,
I think the newsletter would be more appropriate, yeah.
Yeah.
that was one, that's what I'm suggesting, that we can get the word out that way also.
I think that's a good idea, I'll mention it to the city manager, and maybe Jim, if you could write, if you wanna put something at the next newsletter, we could add it to the newsletter.
Any more comments for that? Okay. Okay, we perhaps, can hand it over to Rose a little bit for the summary of our Earth Day event and any other comments and suggestions that we can improve for next year.
First of all, thanks to all the board for helping.
Absolutely, for
Everybody
you
did a
too, yeah.
fantastic job. Couldn't have pulled it off without you. Michelle and Marissa and everybody else that might have been involved to help out. We ended up with 54 vendors altogether. I went through our plans for this year and made notes and added like the state food, permit, address and telephone number, so we know for next year. We have to do that 3 days in advance. We already said we have a few $100, just shy of a few $100 left in our budget. One thing that came up that day is a little girl fell down and we did not have a medical kit. And I knew the Fat Tire Bicycles had one, so I went over there and got it, but we do need to put a medical kit at our booth, so we have that available. We had 27 door prizes donated. Gil, you did all of that. Did that go well by doing questions instead? And thanks so much for taking over the stage. We had 21 contestants do all 3 challenges for the bicycle, and the winner was a 14-year-old from Vero Beach. And when I went and moved my truck around to be able to load it, I saw her and her sister taking turns riding it over by the splash park, practicing on it, so that was pretty cool.
So the wheel did work.
Yeah. And then for next year, I just have a few things. I'm thinking maybe we should start at 9 o'clock instead of 8:30. I think 8:30 was awfully early. The date, I would like to, instead of just pick the Saturday before or the Saturday after Earth Day, I think we need to stop and look what else is going on in the community. For Earth Day, we had the challenge of the Vero Beach Orchid Show, the Melbourne Large Art Festival, Relay for Life was going on here in town. It was opening soccer day on our field, so all the kids were over there, and it was prom in the evening, so we had a lot of draws away from us. But all in all the vendors were very happy. Some of them did good business, some of them didn't do as much, but they just said it was such a beautiful day in the park. They enjoyed being there, and they already signed up for next year, and they want their same location. So I only had one vendor that wasn't happy with his location, but we moved him, and he was one of the ones said, I want the same spot next year. And one food vendor voiced that they weren't happy. But other than that, it all went well.
Good.
Everybody did really well with the wagons. Not one complaint on getting things in and out of the park without a vehicle.
That was a big help. The wagons did help, yeah.
Very much so.
We appreciate that.
Thanks again for your help.
And the, locations for, I think because the vendors, were behind the restroom, and that kinda blocked it, and a lot of people did not go down and venture down there. The fellow that was on the path, he did pretty good, and,
I had them stationed at the west end of the park, and the food truck that parks far east called me the night before and requested to park down there, which I thought he would be more visible back behind our booth, 'cause we could have opened up a path leading down to them, so.
more appropriate, so we can keep that in mind for next year, yeah. And the other thing I'd like to get some more is I have to do it early, is send out some animal participation. I think the big thing is try to keep the people in the park. Some of the rescue places.
We already have a wildlife festival on March, so this is Earth Day, it has
But
nothing to
it's
do
one of
with
those things
animals.
that I think it needs to be there, so in order to we help keep the public there, the kids enjoy it, they get a little more education out of these
I think-
events like that, so the more the merrier, and it keeps the people there.
Animals. Maybe next year we could also plant some trees or something in the park and rejuvenate it, get something going there, it would be nice.
As far as the food vendors go, I think maybe we're gonna have to do something a little bit different for signage for them. You know, because obviously they're gonna be outside the park. But as time goes on, people are gonna learn that no one can park in the park anymore, so the food vendors are gonna be in the outside perimeter. So hopefully by this time next year, they'll be expecting to look for them out in the street and not in the park with us.
Two
So
of the larger
hopefully-
food vendors did end up going to Vero instead of coming to our park, so we only had 4 participate out of the
Yeah.
6 that promised to come.
Yeah, I mean, but you know, we'll see what happens. This was the first time this has ever happened, and it's gonna be a learning curve for everybody.
Mhm.
So, and the vendors that were there, they didn't complain, 'cause I talked to quite a few also, Rose, and they were quite happy with doing it themselves and not pulling in, so it wasn't a problem.
I also noticed when we had the K-9 demonstration and the, signage, that the main park just like went empty. And it got very quiet over there. I don't know if it's good to draw people out of the park, because once they're out, then they can go to their cars a lot easier.
That's true. But I mean, that's a catch-22. If they have something to make them come back into the park, they wanna look at or they wanna participate in, I don't think that'll be a problem. The scavenger hunt, I think, was a great thing for the kids.
Keep it there.
Well, it was an educational thing, but I think maybe we should do something for the adults as well. You know, do something, so maybe a scavenger hunt for them. I think most of the adults did the scavenger hunt for the kids, but, you know, at least get them all participating in something, or do something silly, a game or something that has to do with Earth Day.
We did have a couple adults do all
Oh,
three, and I went back down to the park Saturday night because I did not go over and look at the chalk art
Incredible.
contest. It was.
It
I
was
went back
incredible.
Saturday night after I went home, and it was just beautiful. I took a lot of pictures.
Yep.
And very impressive.
It was very impressive, and I was, you know, the kids were so excited doing the scavenger hunt, and a lot of them were, and then the girl that won the bike wasn't gonna do it, and I said, oh, come on, you know, just do it, you'll have fun, you'll learn something, and then the father says, give me the things, I'll make sure they do it, and all 3 kids did it, and she won. She came over to me, she had this grin on her face like, I won.
Good.
Good. so it was fun. I had a lot of fun doing it, so.
Now, unfortunately, we couldn't do the kayak. That was a no-go, but it's also the same with the sidewalks. People do leave the park, and then with the kayak, you have to go out and come back into the park for the events. And it's still, working. That's a good progress for us, and keep that going.
Is there any way we can close that road? We can't close Indian River Drive, can we? So that the park, when they go over, it's
I apologize. I think if you wanna plan things early, the reason why I say this, when you have the Art Fest, they close Indian River Drive.
Yeah.
Lisa Ann, she closes, those 3 blocks, and she puts all her booths on the road. So I think if you wanna keep expanding, I think this was great. I think it's gonna keep growing, and if it grows, I think you need to look at expanding that out, so you do encompass other areas. So it makes it more feasible for people to walk around, not be held in one area as you grow. And maybe next year you may want to expand and take a portion of Indian River Drive. The problem with Indian River Drive, it takes a lot more resources to control the traffic and to make sure you have accessibility. It's okay to close like Harrison Street, like you always do, and parts of Sebastian Boulevard, but Indian River Drive is a main thoroughfare, so that becomes more logistics. And I know when we do Clam Bake, then police and fire gets involved because they want to have response units close by. It's because we shut all the roads down. They want to have units there in case something happens.
The only other thing I have is I did hand out thank you notes to all the vendors that afternoon before they left, and I have a handful to do yet that I missed, like the stormwater in Ford Outdoor Center, Walmart that wasn't there. So I have a list, and I bought my stamps, I just need to get it out, and I will complete that.
All in all, I think it was a very well done event. It's growing and it's getting better, and we thank you, Rose, for that.
Thank you. It was a
No,
beautiful day.
thank you, Rose, you did a fantastic job.
And
You
everybody
really
else
did.
that stayed there the whole day. It was very helpful. It's not just walking away from the table and taking a break, yeah. The music was excellent. We had a good participation. Maybe we can keep that going with that amount of people. And, the Zumba, that was another early morning wake-up call there.
That was.
And it got warm, and they were gonna do something else, and, it was just, the weather was just too warm, so they had to cancel that. It had been too hot on them to start working out like that in the heat of the day. Any other comments for Earth Day? We'll keep the ball rolling, and we'll move on to improve that for next year. Our next one is the pilot project, and I'm not sure which one we're talking about. Is this the pilot project for the water system, or is the pilot project for the oysters? Pilot project update. If it's about the water system,
I believe it was on the water.
don't have an
Water.
update.
Yeah.
I do not have an update on that. 'Cause I would have to definitely have a consultation with some other folks that are very familiar with this type of project. Okay, moving on, invasive plants.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna ask about, we had a couple of questions that we were going to ask the city engineer, and I just wondered if you had answers.
Again, I apologize. What were the questions? Questions? I don't recall in the minutes, that's why.
From last
Apologize.
last month's meeting, I believe.
I mean, I guess it has to do with the follow-up on if they're spraying when they don't need to spray. And, right, isn't that part of the pilot project? We were asking them not to spray. And then also if we could change some of the, chemicals that were being used.
Again, some of these, these are some of the same questions that have been asked at some of the council meetings. And because I was at these council meetings, I heard loud and clear what the council gave direction on. maintenance that we do for the applied aquatics for spraying our herbicides within our canal systems. That's a contract we've had and we've been maintaining it. Individual residents, well, I was told if they don't want it sprayed within their own frontage, you could put up a sign. But beyond that, that contract is within our requirements to maintain water flows within the canal systems, and we've asked we had a meeting with the aquatic products and we went through the list. One name jumped out and scared everybody, and because it had that one word Roundup in it, and it's not the same one we go to Home Depot and buy in the can. It's a water-based one they use. It has the same ingredients, but it's not the same one you buy at the store. But to be a conscious applied aquatics manager said, we'll switch it out, and they switched it out. Currently now we use rodeo, and it costs a bit more, but we said we're fine because it has such a negative connotation, that one word, and I think it's called Roundup Custom. Applied aquatics switched out. Now they're using rodeo. So that's on the list. There was a list of 4 or 5. That one was switched out per our meeting we had with Applied Aquatics. But beyond that, they have a contract and they're going to keep moving forward until such time a better method is identified. I think at the last council meeting, Councilmember Coy said until a better method is identified, and maybe in this pilot project you guys want to create some better method, but until such a method is feasible from a cost standpoint, maintenance standpoint, for all these standpoints, we got to keep maintaining those waterways. So as many suggestions you guys could come up with a pilot project. I think it's within your realm to consider some sort of project. Just keep coming back by saying we don't want to do it. Unless the city manager and the council gives me direction, those crews are going to keep doing it. It's not within my realm either. Until such time, maybe this commission, hearing from the public, if you want to come up with some sort of a pilot project, that's within to create something, have an idea. It's got to go. I'm assuming it's got to go in front of the city council because it's pretty clear that they don't want to deal with it at this time. Until something better comes up, maybe you guys come up with a better plan. I don't know, but I'm just throwing that out there to, get it going, because those questions keep coming about. You just mentioned, why can't we not do this, and why can't you come up with a better? We've looked at all options. Physical manual labor is very time expensive. We don't have it. We don't have the resources. Our crews we only have a handful of public works crews. Bringing out heavy equipment or mechanical equipment, that's infeasible too. Most of the areas we don't have right of way. The only way to get back there is by boats, and that's what Applied Aquatics does. You go out there by boats. And then when we start talking about getting on people's right of ways, and there's issues regarding, you need to have an easement to get on their right of way. Some people may be open, some people may not.
Do we do it, or did we ask the state to do it?
We have a contract with Applied. It's our contract, the city contract, the same contract we piggyback off of the Florida, Fish and Wildlife contract. Our current contract is piggyback. When you call it piggyback, Fish and Wildlife has a contract to use Applied Aquatics. We said, hey, we want to piggyback off that same contract, and that's all we did.
Okay, so the people who are actually spraying, are they city employees, or are they?
No, they're contract. They're from the Applied Aquatics.
They're off of, okay.
Yeah.
So, the city resources wouldn't really change any if we asked the state in St. John's to change what they're doing. They're still doing the same amount of work, and it doesn't add anything to the city, right? We just ask them to change it.
Let me clarify again. I think there's a clarification you guys need to understand about permitting agencies, regulatory agencies, Fish and Wildlife. And I keep hearing this word about, you need to have a, permit. A permit is needed when we do like an improvement. Good example, we installed the oyster mast. The permit is to make sure you do it within, so you don't have any impacts. Wildlife impacts, wetland impacts, and it depends on which agency takes the lead. Regarding these waterways, these canals are city canals. The only requirement we have is conveyance of water. We have to move the water through the system, or we flood the city. No different if you look at the waterways like roads. If I don't keep the roads moving, it's an impediment to the community, because then you can't move yourself, you can't move goods, so you have to keep the roads moving. There's no permit that I have to get from FDOT or from the Federal Highway Administration. Our due diligence as a city is to maintain roadways and make sure they're they're accessible, so people could use them. There is no permit there. No different than the waterways, there's no permit. Only requirement we have under St. John's is to convey water. If we start to not keep those canals open and they get choked up and the water can't move, we flood the system, then they come back and slap us by saying, you're not doing your job to move your water, make it clean, make it safe, take care of lagoons, all that stuff goes with it. And that's the only requirement they have, but there's not a permit that says we have to do, I don't go every year and get a permit from St. John's or from DEP or from Fish and Wildlife. Fish and Wildlife you hear their name because we're using their contract. They spray their facilities like we're spraying ours. And the same company that does Fish and Wildlife I think they do St. John's, they do South Florida Water Management District, they do DEP, they do a variety. If you look in their list of clients, it's almost every regulatory agency in Florida. So, and that's why we piggyback off of them.
Now, they're not supposed to spray unless they see it's necessary. Can we ask them, and can we check on them to make sure that it's not spraying when it's not necessary? Do we have the right to tell them not to spray our canals?
All I know is that they go out and they spray as needed. And maybe they go out and spray too. From what I heard, they don't. I think our councilperson, the last time they came, followed them in our public works boat, and they weren't out. I think they do their best job because the reason why I know this, the dollar amount they spend is not constant. It's not like they go out there and spray like crazy because then the dollar amount would be the same. It keeps fluctuating. So I know they must be using their due diligence to not spray as much when they don't need to because I see the invoices differ when they come. I'm just using my common sense as an engineer. If they're out there, if that dollar amount keeps going up, then I say, it's like anything, you're spraying way too much. But it varies depending upon how deep and how much weeds are out there. And I can tell because we look at our own canal systems. I can see there's a lot of grass out there. They need to spray a little bit more. And then that goes a little higher. And there's times when we do a good job and it's not as much rain and the weeds aren't growing as fast. So I can see that, and so I'm assuming they use their common sense. They tell their technicians to use, your best judgment. If you don't need to spray, don't spray. I can't be upfront. I'm not on that boat, But I just looking at the facts, the numbers I see. I'm assuming someone's using some knowledge and saying, hey, we're not spraying like crazy.
I'm naive about what the total acreage, or is it 100 yards? Is it an eighth of a mile that's being sprayed? What sections? Is it in sections? That I'd be interesting to find out is how much. It's our entire canal system. That's all the waterways we have. That includes the Hardy Park area. That includes the Northern Corridor Canal, the Southern Corridor Canal, the Elkham Waterway, the George Canal Waterway System, the Schumann Waterway System, all those, and a few additional ponds we have as well. I think they spray the periwinkle pond. They spray all the ponds because they want to make sure those ponds don't become grown with vases or some wetland. Because once a facility's good example was periwinkle, I helped design it and build it. Within a month after we built it, 2 leaves started growing on it, and the agency said, you got to knock that out because if it continues, that'll become a wetlands and your project's dead as a retention pond. So right off the bat, the agencies told me, you got to get that out of there because that pond was created to be a retention pond, not a wetlands. And so they look at that too. The agencies look at. They created a pond for retention. We're currently building a brand new one right now for Tulip, right off of Tulip. If right off of Croquet, it's a big 2-acre lot that's nothing but trees. We're in the process, hopefully, to get the permit, and then we're going to put in another retention pond. But it'd be the same thing. We're going to put in a retention pond. That means it's going to hold water. So it's not going to be an area where wetlands is supposed to grow. It's supposed to hold water, retention water. That's what periwinkle is. Any other comments on that for our project? I for one will just take a ride and go to some of the sections in the parks and waterway and see how it works out. Okay, next I guess would be public input. Yes, sir, step up. Remind you, but a brief, I'm sorry?
Invasive plants.
Oh, the invasive plants, I'm sorry. Yes, we'll hold off on that. And what's our topic for discussion on the invasive plants? eradicating personal property,
Well, I went to the
Peppers.
same meeting you were at the meeting that I was at, Rose, with the invasive plants and the pollution going into the lagoon. Most of the invasive plants are being sold at Home Depot, Lowe's, Walmart. When they give you the list and you look at it and you compare it to what you can buy there, so that would be a monumental
effort.
project and effort, because first you would have to convince these gardeners or garden centers, you can't carry that. And they're big sellers, so they're gonna carry it.
Could you tell me, 'cause I don't know what an invasive is, which one it is anyway?
Oh, I don't have the list, I did not bring it with me, but it's, okay, Rose has it, it's like 3 pages.
Quite a bit of them, yeah.
Last month, Jane Sinead was here and she had a list and it wasn't southeast Florida. So I went to the University of Florida and I pulled off their main invasive plants.
Oh, thank you.
And then I found another website which brochures were already made up, so that I can read it. Florida Exotic Pest Plant Council, and they have a flyer already made up and it has all of the invasives on it.
I mean, this is one thing we can,
Or not to carry.
right.
Yeah.
It's up to the general public and the homeowner, or the gardener, the green thumb person that would like to, if we could put something like that on the website, if it gives out some public outreach
Yeah.
and information to have native plantings. Just, you can visit the ELC down at Wabasso and, they won't plant anything that's not native. And it's one of those things, they want to attract butterflies, they'll have some plants that are not growing from Hawaii here to Florida, that sort of thing. So it's native plants only.
Do we start visiting private vendors in the community? And we had a couple at Earth Day, but they didn't have any invasive. That's another one, and I would think it would be county, it wouldn't be city, so.
And perhaps we can put that on the budget for next year if there's enough money to have a few hundred of those copies and give them to the garden stores in town. And have them, as the folks come in and visit the store and purchase something, they can take a copy right from there.
Chair, maybe to help out, I think this idea of educating and creating brochures and marketing and other one-way communication is, I think, is very good. I think the NRB should take the lead on that. I think it should be on the webpage. I think whatever information you want to tailor more towards Sebastian, I think will help Sebastian out. Because I've seen some of these DEP and they're more statewide. I think we need to look more towards what's in River County or more so what's in Sebastian. So then the average person who sees that could relate to, this is Sebastian, so, well, okay, I could do this. Maybe scale it to make it more attainable, because sometimes when you see these 100-page, people just kind of just, but if you make it more attainable, says we're looking at maybe the worst one or the worst 5, I'm just trying to scale the scope so that way this commission could...
Well, we know we'll put pepper trees at the top.
Oh, yes, we do. And maybe educating more and more. My only concern would be, I think that is good, communicating is good, education in terms of brochures, documents, but actually going to individual private sources. My only concern would be if I was, because I know Walmart, I know the manager. If you went to Walmart and he's a great guy, he'll say, "Why are you picking me? Why aren't you picking Walgreens or the general florist or I could see that happening, and he could be a true supporter of invasive plants too, but he may be wearing a corporate hat too, because I came from the private sector and sometimes there's stuff that corporate tell me to do, and it's kind of, well, that doesn't make sense, but if that's what corporate wants, I work for that company. I think it's better if we start from the educational standpoint, and maybe he then takes it upon himself to say, you know what, Sebastian's NRB came up with a great educational component, great, he'll take that up to corporate and say, hey, look at this, Sebastian wants to do this, I think we should follow what Sebastian wants. And then that'll give him the tool within those agents, those public, distributions, like stores, to say, we don't want to do this anymore. I think that's a better approach than to try to go out and to talk to those individuals. I could just see that being an issue later on. I think it's better if you start with the educational component, and it's okay to talk to those stores by saying, hey, help me help you. We got these brochures. Can you use them? Posters. Can you put them in your stores? Those things I'm sure that he'll say, Mark will say, not a problem, you know. And then he'll be the first to take a brochure back to corporate. I know Mark. He'll just go back, hey, this is what Sebastian wants. He says, I want to be a community. My store is a community store. I want to do what the community wants. The community wants to take care of vases. We need to support that. So I think that's the better approach, to give him the ammunition to go back to corporate Walmart to say, hey, Sebastian don't want to do this, and we want to play with Sebastian. Let's just jump on board and help out Sebastian. No different than he helped out with the bike and stuff. I think they're a great store. I know Mark's a great store. He's very passionate for the community. He'll support whatever we feel we want to do for Sebastian. So, and that's just my suggestion.
Great, maybe we'll get 2 bikes next year.
Well, I agree with Frank. I think we need to educate the public first. If we educate the public enough, they're not gonna go into these places and buy those plants. And then when they're not selling them, then they might consider, well, maybe that's something we shouldn't be selling. Especially the small guys.
1 or 2 pictures like what Bros has
Yeah,
there.
and and I don't think
Help
you
you
can,
decorate your home.
we don't wanna create,
That one only has 8 of the worst ones on it and very clear.
yeah.
This other one is all by botanical name first, so you really have to search
A
to
little more
find
scientific
something.
name.
You can't make it hard, you gotta make it easy, it's gotta be up front, you know, take the first 5 that are the worst 5 and start with 5. And if people learn that, and that's 5 less they're gonna buy, then we're that far ahead. But I don't wanna cause bad feelings with the small business guy. If we want them to come to Earth Day and sell their products, we don't wanna make them mad and say, we're not coming because you're telling us we can't sell this and we can't sell that.
No, it's just a recommendation that they
That's
have
right,
this
but,
available to the public.
you're right, but we don't want them to think that we're policing them either, even though,
No, I made sure before either vendor came there was no invasives.
yeah. But, you know, I mean, you gotta
I did
approach
police
things
them.
properly, don't put them on the defensive.
But
And then-
that's a nice brochure. Can we get the state to give them to us? I mean, you printed it off the state website. Do they have one?
From the
Can-
University of Florida.
Oh, the University of Florida, okay.
They have a ton of information.
This is kind of follows up to the issue we had discussed the other week about fertilizer. The fertilizers don't comply with the county's rules, and that's a county issue. I understand they've been communicating with them, but you know, as a citizen, it gets aggravating when stores are allowed to sell products that don't comply with the rules of the land. There needs to be some way of getting their attention and letting them know that we don't appreciate their behavior. It's not appropriate. I don't know how we do that and not make them mad.
And
Yeah, well,
We need to put our heads together over the next few months and see if we can't find a way.
if you're talking about the big box stores, it's all corporate, has nothing to do with the guy in the local store. You know, you gotta get to corporate. If you can't get to corporate, then it's not gonna work. They have to comply. And it depends on how much pressure corporate gets. And then again, it goes back to the educational part. If the people are not buying it and that product is sitting on their shelves and it's not moving, they're not gonna wanna keep buying the same product and have it sit there and not make any money on it. So, it's good, it's a vicious circle, and that's the circle we have to close it somehow.
So it would be good of us to go visit the stores and just take an inventory and see what we see that is invasive, because I don't really see a lot of these in the stores. Maybe we should just see, I know the fertilizers and Roundups in the center aisle, but
Yeah, well, that's a huge seller, and I mean, I'm not
We should-
saying that to be sarcastic, but that's what they promote, 'cause people wanna get rid of their weeds, and it's fast, it's quick, let's do it. So, is it right? No, but that's what they do. It's like, goes right back, like I said, educating the public, there's other things out there they can use, they don't have to use Roundup, but that's not what is advertised on the television.
But what Rose just printed out is, to me, is very helpful, because I never knew what a Brazilian pepper looked like. I don't know what these plants look like. and to see a nice little picture, and it's not that they're selling them, because nobody's selling Brazilian pepper anymore,
No.
but I needed to know what it looks like, so I would know how to pull it out, but and I didn't know what the others looked like. I really didn't. So Rose just printed off the 8 or 7, and just to have those out on the website with a picture would help, I know me, because I didn't know
I
what they
think
looked
Barbara
like.
can put that on the website as another addition to our website.
Maybe do these trees and start with a few plants also.
Well, I have a question on the fertilizing. I hear different things. You can't fertilize, you can. I don't do my own yard, so I don't know. So what's the story? Can you or can you not fertilize?
We actually have a fertilizer ordinance that's identical to the county, that matches up to the county. Under the county fertilizer ordinance, there are requirements they have for fertilization, when you can do it, when you can't do it, when not to overwater and stuff. I don't know the details. I know the county has a real comprehensive plan, and they have a person that goes out and checks the stores and checks to make sure that the numbers on the bags, whatever, like it goes back to the consumer. If they buy it, the stores will keep selling it.
Okay, well,
and why the stores carry it, you know what I'm saying?
if there's a moratorium at certain times where you cannot fertilize,
That's for
then they should not be able to sell it.
the fertilization. I think some of those are more towards the landscape companies. I still think the worst culprit is the individual homeowner. It's not because we use an outside company and they don't care that, because they said the county says here's the ordinance, and our trucks, we follow the ordinance. It's the guy next door who buys the stuff at Walmart and goes out there and starts dumping away all the fertilizer in his yard and turns green. That's the problem. I think the majority, and they go, that's just one person. One person times 20,000 makes a big issue. Where I think the actual fertilizing companies, the Massey's and all those other ones, I think they try to stay within those rules. I think they're afraid if they get caught with something that doesn't meet the county's requirements, they will lose their license. I think those guys are not the problem. They may have a bad technician. I think it's the individual homeowners. I think it's the educational, and I think the county's trying their best with websites and marketing, and they have a lady that goes out and tries to be positive about it. Like Ann says, don't be the stick, but try to be positive and try to promote, hey, let's be good, neighbors, and let's be good environmentally people conscious, and not use, bad, fertilizer when we're not supposed to, because it runs off and goes to the canal system. But, if that person still wants to go back out the day before it rains and fertilizes his yard, and it runs off into,
Right, but most people don't stockpile fertilizer. So if it's during a time where you aren't supposed to fertilize, then I think that's something that can be enforced, that these stores should not sell it. I'm sorry, it's no different than selling pot. That's not legal in Florida.
But again, these products, you're right, the stores maybe shouldn't stock them, but they do. But the stores, they're there to make, like she's saying, it's corporate. They're not going to say if they have bags of fertilizer and it's not the time to sell it. If some guy comes in, I want a pallet of fertilizer, they're going to sell it in a heartbeat. And whether or not they want to use it to do something bad, this goes back to any tool you get. Any tool, if a person wants to do something not correct or not legal, that's his. And then if he gets caught, he'll get reprimanded or jail, whatever, or crime. But that's this country is. People have to make that freedom choice that says, I'm a good Samaritan, I'm a good person, I'm a good environmentalist. I don't want to buy that stuff, and I'm not going to use that stuff. And I'm going to tell my neighbor, hey, Joe, knock it off. It's going to rain tomorrow. Don't fertilize. But that doesn't happen. That's why I think these commissions are here to help market it, education, and to just be the positive side of it and not be the stick. I think you get more with the positive side, education, brochures, webs, and then people start realizing, hey, I want to be a good person too. Maybe I'll tell my neighbor Joe, knock it off in a nice way. Hey Joe, I'll help you out. Some way, there's always a better way to approach it than trying to use a stick and try
Okay,
to
then
make
how
it
about the
wrong.
marquee out here in front of the, City Hall? Now is not the time to fertilize. People drive down Main Street all the time.
And I can
There's
bring up-
some PR right there,
I
they
could bring
can
up
see
city
it.
manager. That marquee is usually used to highlight meetings that goes on here.
Yeah.
The same way the marquee is up at Riverview Park. That's what it's used for. If they want to start using it more for other, the problem is if you start using it for other campaigns, then it just runs rapid. When do you stop? Was it for the next high school dance, or it's next you know what I'm saying? It just opens it up to, that's why we keep these marquees only for these.
Right, well, and this is
business.
something that impacts the entire community, not a high school dance.
I understand,
So,
but, you know, but.
I think that's something that we should possibly explore, is, we want the advertising, I'm sorry, how many people go on the website? I don't wanna be the,
I
you
don't know
know,
how many people
doomsayer,
go on the
but,
website, but if they do go on the on our NRB website, there are a host of, there is an ordinance for fertilizer use, and there are a lot of links
Yeah.
to have take care of your Florida lawn. So
I'd almost
we have
be
a lot
willing
of
to bet
information
that
on our
90%
website.
of the residents of Sebastian have not been on that website.
I agree with that, but the information's
So-
there.
You know, and if we want to become good stewards of our land and our property, then the more exposure, be it just the marquee out in front of City Hall, that I think most people make a trip at least once a week down Main Street. That's something that they can see, that's a visibility. Or maybe get just like not a bulletin board or whatever those things are on the side of the road, what are I can't think, billboard, that's it, billboard. Not a billboard, but something along that line, or like a campaign poster thing. Now is not the time.
I think if that's something we wanna pursue,
And even to advertise the website itself. If we get the information for the website out, the more it goes out, people are gonna go, oh, let me go look at that.
I think if that's something that we wanna do, then I think we should have the city manager come to one of our meetings and ask him, what do you think, Frank? Do you think that would be a good idea, or have him,
I think if you wanna, come up with some sort of, educational component, a campaign, and then you wanna present it, and we could present it to the city manager, you know, I think that's more appropriate than trying to have, you know, I hear it all the time when the commission says, we want the city manager here. I think the city manager, you know, listens to these meetings, and, or at least, you know, reads the minutes, and he's knowledgeable of all the stuff. I think it's appropriate for you guys to give him, here's what we hope to do, and if this includes a marquee, I think it's great, but package it up, and we'll be happy to give it to the city manager.
Okay.
And then he'll make it upon his stuff if he disagrees with it, disagrees with it, or he presents it to his bosses, the city council.
But to go forth with a plan,
Yeah, I agree.
complete, okay.
and do you think and this is another thing, not to throw a little crook in this, but do you think we should also find out about the sign ordinances? 'Cause I know us having a marquee might not fit into, you know,
Well,
a billboard or
The
whatever.
sign ordinances, it's a big issue right now, 'cause they're getting on the sign ordinance, they're trying
Right.
to go by the rules, and I think it's going through other commissions, so I don't think it's appropriate for this commission to be touching that area where there's
Okay.
other areas being touched right now, and that's it's gonna go in front of the city council, so I
Right.
think that's within their purview on that sign issue.
Well, I was just thinking, if we put up some kind of a sign, it's gonna have to be something that's gonna be approved by somebody, I'm sure,
Well,
correct?
I'm just saying, because they're tightening down on the signage, you know, your attempt by saying, let's put up these signs may not go too far, 'cause, you know, from what I hear from the council basically said, hold to our sign ordinance, and that's why they told code enforcement, go on US 1, pop all the signs. Now there's a whole bunch of people not happy, you know.
That's why, I know, I read those.
Yeah, and so, and I understand what you're saying, you wanna do what you have to do, it's,
Yeah.
you know, it makes sense to be educational, but the city has a sign ordinance that says you can't have these signs up.
Our ordinance says we're not allowed to water or fertilize in the summer months when it's the rainy season.
June to
But if you-
October.
Mhm. June to October, but if you follow our weather pattern in the last year, when we were allowed to fertilize,
Topsy-turvy.
it rained all season, so it's really
It's tough.
up to the homeowner. I have an elderly neighbor, and he, like you said, thinks it's fantastic to fertilize before the rain, because then it sinks in. We have a retention pond across the street that's right next to the St. Sebastian River, so to try to educate and tell him no. It's tough.
Can't fix it.
It's not easy, Rose.
Moving on. We'll keep that one. All right, we can continue with public input.
Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to make a couple comments here of what you discussed prior. The oyster restoration project, you had mentioned, I guess Gil had mentioned, to monitor the area. there's a key factor in it, which is the salinity. I come out of New York where they had the Blue Point oyster, which is supposedly world known. But there's a salinity content for the growth of the spat on those oyster shells. From what I'm hearing, our river doesn't even come close to what the salinity level should be. I don't know who the party was, but they had an oyster spat business at the working waterfront. That's why you saw all those shielded nets, etc. Now, I moved here 9 years ago. That gentleman was there for about 6 following years. I don't know the reason he left, maybe because it became city, etc., etc. But there's a man that has knowledge. I don't know who the company was or is, if they're still around, who might have a lot more input into the spat for the oyster. And possibly monitoring the salinity or whatever the special requirement is for the oyster, which I don't think we have at the moment. Earth Day was great, and the expansion of the oysters going up towards the working waterfront. You were told that you had a permit that was only for a pilot program. Piggyback on the working waterfront program. Should be easy, right? Yes, no? All right. Invasive plants, we all know about that. A point of interest, my landscaper, DeCosta, I asked him to get me a bag of fertilizer. Well, he comes over to the house and I paid him for the bag of fertilizer. And I says, yo, what happened here? Well, the middle number in the bag of fertilizer is 0. So there's no phosphate in it. I think they pushed the nitrogen number up a little bit, but now that was a commercial bag of fertilizer that the majority of our contractors utilize. We're talking about spraying. The county sprays some form of chemical. I've seen the crews along US 1. It's the county workers. When they do the swales, that's right up coming into our town, both sides. You'll see that all of a sudden, there's a 10-foot swath going right down the swale. It's brown. The little pond going up Schumann, every so often you'll see 8 to 10 feet around that ring, that pond. That's sprayed and brown. I didn't look too much further anywhere else. I gave the city council and a few other people 2 years ago pictures of the hydrilla coming up to the spillway at C-54. That's when I started to inquire about it. And it was the company that St. John's hires, et cetera, et cetera. But maybe we look at the county to get their input on what they're using, who they're using, or do they have trained personnel in their highway department that take care of it? I was told then that it doesn't harm the fish. Well, this beautiful hydrilla that the poison broke the bond between the root and the estuary was going over the spillway, and the manatees were consuming it. Now, they said it doesn't harm fish. Well, manatee in my book is not a fish. This vegetation was bright green, healthy looking, containing a chemical, which I found out, I lost my paperwork with these names that are 200 feet long, I can't pronounce. But that vegetation drifts down through the Sebastian River, and it lands on the bottom adjacent to a healthy piece of grass. And we can't figure out why the grass isn't at the mouth of the river anymore or in this area. I kept asking that question. I asked it of Indian River City Council members. I gave them pictures. I gave our council members pictures. I went out to Orca and these other outfits, gave them pictures, went over to Wabasso, gave them the discs, put a little note there, call me. I received 0 phone calls, like the phosphate number in the fertilizer. Up north, years ago, we had a sewer program coming in. The first thing our county did was declare phosphate non-included in the laundry detergents. I don't know if Florida has that law. We had a lot of upset people. They were running over the border, going into the other county, purchasing laundry detergent with the phosphate in it. But the county I was in stopped it. Came off the shelves, it was gone. You're talking about big box stores, it affected everybody. They passed an ordinance at county level. Town would probably have a hard time doing it. That was the first step, because they were talking about putting sewers in. They then proceeded to put sewers in. Well, the bay hasn't changed with the sewers. Their progress, after putting a big plant in and charging the people for, et cetera, whatever, they ran out of funds. The only benefit that showed up was the fact that the tanks they were using for taking the effluent and processing it went underground, and they put a beautiful golf course on it. But it didn't help the bay. The phosphates was the problem. Florida's got a bigger problem. We're standing on it. It's a phosphate mine. So when you take a reading in the river, has it been disturbed that created the higher level? Was it heavy rains that turned things up? Between the scientists and the phosphates, they also said there was a massive rise in nitrogen. Well, if you take a reading after the rain, it drives the nitrogen into the water. Yeah, I can now go and say, hey, I need more money to take care of nitrogen. Well, hell, it's gone in 3 days after it scatters out. Other question is, what's Florida Power and Light or any utility spraying around their power line poles? We had it up north. What's the railroad spraying along the tracks? You go along those tracks, there's not one smidgen of grass growing up. Well, it turned out it was a derivative up north years ago of Agent Orange. Now, I don't know what they're using now. They've probably done something different. But again, whatever the railroad's spraying, which might help us in some way trying to keep a railroad out, nothing grows along that track. And I'm not talking where the stones are, where they put the rail for the railroad track. I'm talking the dirt that's on the side of it. And again, Florida Power, they're spraying. Our county was driving along roads. There was a guy in a truck with a nozzle, and they'd pull along, and where the barriers were along the roadways, they were just spraying this along out of the truck. What it was, I don't know. But it was during that era when the wrong stuff was being used. I don't know what they're using now. I'm just going to leave that as food for thought. Maybe somebody can direct it and look into some of that. I mean, I try, but...
I have a question for you. You're saying your fertilizer was 0 phosphate. Are you complaining about that, or
No.
did you want?
No.
Because if we plant native trees, we want 0 phosphate. We don't need to put any more phosphate into our ground.
No, I was just pointing out that we've got no phosphate. That's the problem. My fertilizer that came was 0. I was very happy about that.
Okay.
You know, and again, whether the big box companies would do it, well, maybe they do something different in Wisconsin, the same big box company. You know, the Home Depot, different states may have different applications that the big box complies with. Maybe a matter of just saying, hello, what do you do in Jersey? What do you do in Delaware? And they may say, hey, we don't sell that. Well, hello, don't sell it here. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Any other public input?
Ben Hawker.
Step up, please. Just as a reminder, 5 minutes, please.
Okay.
Frank, how are you? Good evening. My name is Graham Cox. I live at 1213 George Street in Sebastian. At the last meeting of this committee on April 5th, we began a discussion of the alternative methods for controlling aquatic weeds in the city's canals and waterway system. We presented the committee clerk with a spreadsheet showing at least 30 of the 60 alternative treatments that are authorized for use in Florida and described by the University of Florida Extension people, and asked that this list be shared with the committee members and with the city manager and city engineer. And I hope that this has happened, because that's a comprehensive list of things that when we've talked about alternatives, here's your alternatives, the ones that are approved. It's a good start for discussion with that list. At the last meeting of the City Council on April 27th, we again raised this issue and asked to see the appropriate documents that provide for the city's authority to use herbicide sprays along the canals and waterways. In my mail yesterday, I received from the city clerk's office several documents that make up the contract between the city and the State Fish and Wildlife Commission and St. John's on the one hand, and Applied Aquatics on the other. Useful as this contract is, we still don't have, and I'm going to dispute with Frank over the permit issue, we still don't have a copy of the permit nor the management plan that is the background for producing the permit that they need to operate. This is a contract, it's not a permit. It doesn't reference a permit, but it looks to me like the permit belongs or is given to Applied Aquatics. We need to see it. What we do know is the cost per month based on this contract, based on the monthly rate sheet and dated in 2009. The cost then was $4,215 per month, with a provision to raise the price 5% each year. So let's round that price up now to 2016 prices, and we're spending $5,500 a month on Applied Aquatics doing this work. In the contract, it spells out the obligations of the contractor, and I'm going to select a couple for you to think about. Number one, the herbicide applicator must be certified with the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. Any non-certified applicator must be under the direct visual supervision of a certified applicator. We have reason to believe and to question that this is in fact not happening. The applicator who's out there is just operating without really knowing what he's doing and without any supervision. Second, the contractor has to report in considerable detail to a state site manager, that is a state office. That means that there must be a sizable paper trail that we can follow to see just what work is done and when and what has been sprayed and how much. And that's important because people, when you ask them if they know what's going on, will tell you there's millions of gallons being sprayed and they're probably doing it for mosquito control. There's no real serious knowledge among homeowners along the canal as to what is going on out there. The third point, the work must be performed in the most cost-effective manner to control target plants while protecting to the greatest degree practical the non-target flora and fauna, the environment and the public from work. That's what's supposed to be in the management plan that we need to get a copy of. Fourth, the airboats must be marked prominently with the contractor's name and phone number. They're not. You don't see the name and phone number. 5, the contractor has to post signs indicating applicable water use restrictions at access points in the treatment area and appropriate shoreline locations. You don't see any signs. You don't see anything telling you what he's doing. The contractor has to have at each work site a record of wind readings prior to starting the spraying and hourly during the spraying. So wind is important. We need to know those records. If these guys are going out in bad conditions and spraying this stuff, we need to know that. 7, the contractor must have oxygen readings each day before starting management operations. These are dissolved oxygen readings in the water, and they cannot be below 5 parts per million. We need to see those records, because if they're spraying when the dissolved oxygen levels are low, then that's an obvious hazard to the fish and the life that's in the water. The contractor has to provide the site manager, that is the state site manager, with weekly written records saying what chemicals were used, how much, total acres sprayed, total operating hours, total hours of adverse weather conditions, the number of water restriction signs posted, and the dissolved oxygen measurements. Believe me, we'll track those down, because if people want to know what is being used in their canals, we'll go and get the records. The contract list, the contract lists 11 approved herbicides and spray additives, and this list includes glyphosate, also known as Roundup by a lot of other names, 2,4-D-amine, diquat, and a list of other potentially harmful chemicals. At the council meeting the other night, Councilwoman Andrea Coy denied that glyphosate was now being used. Aquamaster, which is now being used, she said was not glyphosate. It is. It's glyphosate salt, and that's why it's a watered-down version of it. It doesn't contain a lot of the additives, but it's glyphosate all the same. So we get into this business of arguing over names. It's glyphosate. The contract also lists all the water bodies to be treated by applied aquatics, and there was a question earlier about which waterways they're listed in this contract. I'm going to repeat my request for the permit and the plant management plan, because that is what the state law requires that there be. The management plan must be regularly updated and must show all the alternative management options that were considered before they settled on the current plan. We're going to keep asking the city for this, and we'll broaden our request to all the relevant state agencies. If the city doesn't have the plan, the state agencies have got to have it, because they can't do this without a permit and without a management plan. And I'll just add one last thing. At the last meeting, Mr. Bishop started to ask a list of very good questions about the herbicide spraying operations. My final question is this: will the Natural Resources Committee consider this list and present it to the City Council and City Manager as part of your responsibility to protect the environment of the City of Sebastian? They deserve to be answered. They're good questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're willing enough to bring it up, and I thought you had presented this to City Council. You had done what you just spoke to us now. Did you present that to City Council?
We have asked constantly for the permit and for the management plan.
Okay, I'm not sure if some of those details is public information. Some of it may be held on to the company. I have no clue.
Oh, it's all public information. It's nothing secret.
Have you submitted a Freedom of Information request?
Our understanding was, when we approached City Council the other day, that a verbal request for these documents was perfectly adequate. You didn't have to submit Freedom of Information by letter, because we asked for it in public. We'll do that. We'll follow all those courses. If we have to, we'll go and get it.
I was at that meeting, and they did say a verbal request was sufficient.
Yeah, and Councilman Gilmore is asking all the same questions. So, that's. I'm assuming that at the same time that they sent this to me, Councilman Gilmore got a copy of it. Any more questions?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Council. Any other public input? New business? Actually, no. Continuation of perhaps joining with, that was a question for me can we piggyback with the working waterfront on the project?
Maybe at the next meeting, I'll give you an update on the working waterfront oyster project, restoration project. I'll ask the city manager. I'll say that the NRB now has completed the pilot project, and they're interested in working on the city project, and I'll bring that up to the city managers for him to make a call which way he wants to go. But I'll be happy for the next meeting to give a presentation. Where are we? What was the scope? Where we're headed with the overall? By then, I should have the scope from the Indian River Lagoon approved, so that way I can present that to the commission, so you can see what the project's all about.
All right, thank you, Frank. Any other member matters? Okay, our items. Any items for the next agenda? If not, we email Michelle about it.
We do need to put on the next agenda the election of the chairperson.
That's one point, yes. Any other items for next month?
Are we going to also ask for, still talk about the pilot program for the, waterways? Any research to go into that and bring it up again next meeting?
Okay, sure, we can do that. Michelle wants to put that on the agenda. And
If we
I'll-
want to continue on with the invasive plants too,
Yes,
other than just the trees, I'll look up the top plants and we'll get something approved to put on the website.
I think it'd be
I
good
would say go ahead and talk to Barbara. I think someone mentioned maybe having Barbara,
to put it on the
you know,
site
I think it's a good idea.
Okay.
and see which plants are top sellers here in this area. Would be interesting. In regards to, the oyster mats, and this gentleman saying about the salinity and dissolved oxygen levels that might be in our waters, the Indian River Lagoon Preserve people came out and surveyed our areas north of the city, south of the city, and they also put over 1,000 bags on the North Island, just adjacent to Brevard County, Island number 1, IRC number 1. And it's taking place. The spats were conducive there, and we're hoping that it's the same thing here. Sure, over time, 20, 30 years ago, oysters and clams were proficient. Time has changed, and so we're seeing that. Hopefully, as the river and more better water comes in, and we can hopefully maintain that, we should see something growing there within at least a year or two. But the Lagoon Preserve people did their survey and recommended to us as a board that this is an okay spot to put this in. All right, if there's any other comments, if not, we can adjourn tonight's meeting.